Hey there, welcome to Play Noggin. I'm Julian, your brains player too. The Call of Duty games have had their reputation somewhat tarnished in recent years. What started as an exhilarating FPS grounded in the Second World War eventually devolved into sci-fi fantasy multiplayer-focused shooters, where 12-year-olds on the other side of the world told you things you never knew your mom did. The latest installment, Call of Duty World War II, has returned to the series' roots, but kept some of the zany qualities it picked up along the way, like the ever-popular Nazi zombies. So as we're back in the warm, familiar setting of 1940s Europe, killing Nazis dead and then re-dead, it's fun to remind ourselves how far science has come since the greatest generation ate carrots to help them kick Hitler's butt in the dark. Yes, one of the most famous myths that still lingers to this day is the wondrous effect the pointy orange veggie can have on our night vision. While it is true that the high vitamin A content of carrots makes them good for your eye health, they won't improve your ability to see at night, as people believed. This myth was actually spread intentionally by the British Ministry of Information. How's that for an Orwellian name? The Ministry of Information popularized the idea to cover up a crucial technological advantage. German bombers preferred to raid cities under cover of darkness, but the recent development of radar made the bombers easy pickings for Allied fighters. To keep the Germans from figuring out why their bombers suddenly weren't safe at night, the British leaked that their ace pilot's secret weapon was a diet heavy in carrots. Whether the Germans ever bought the ruse is debatable, but either way, they sure do seem blind when I'm sneaking up on them in the dark. The myth did make an impression on the general British population though, and that did benefit the war effort in another way. By claiming carrots would help them see when their cities were blacked out during bombing raids, British citizens had more incentive to shift their diet and grow their own food when war put a strain on supplies. While I didn't see any carrots while I was running around shanking Nazis in the neck, I did notice that COD World War II has ditched modern games' use of health regeneration and gone back to the old system of medkits. And that's appropriate considering how old combat medicine from World War II is compared to today. Some methods are still tried and true, like a tourniquet is still the go-to treatment when explosives amputate limbs. But the famous image of combat medics using morphine syrettes is a thing of the past. It's not because we have more effective painkillers, it's because morphine does the job a little too well. By numbing the pain so completely, morphine can calm a wounded soldier down to the point that their blood pressure drops. And for someone whose blood pressure is already dangerously low from blood loss, that's the last thing the medic wants. Today's combat medics use ketamine instead, which doesn't so much numb the pain as make the patient not care about it as much. The pain is still there, keeping the body in survival mode. But the biggest myth science left in the dust is the foundation of Nazism and therefore arguably the cause of World War II, the idea of genetic purity and superiority. While DNA's exact structure wasn't solved until 1953, scientists knew DNA existed decades before that, and perversions of the infant science of genetics led some to believe that their biological code that made them was better than everybody else's. This dehumanizing thinking made it possible for them to perform horrendous experiments on other living humans, like testing the effects of new and dangerous drugs, amputating and attaching limbs from other people, or dissecting twins to figure out why twins happen, for the purpose of rapidly breeding their own pure race. I know we think the Nazi zombie game mode is fun, but it is a bit more gruesome when you remember crazy Nazi human experiments were not that far-fetched. Today, we know the idea of racial purity or superiority has no basis in science. Your genetic code has a long and winding history with contributions from ancestors that span the planet. For example, almost all Europeans today have genetic code from the Middle East thanks to two major migrations in the last 15,000 years. If you go back only 1,000 years, which is a blink of an eye in human history, just about nobody's DNA is what you would think of as pure. Only a few really secluded populations, like Australian Aborigines, have avoided much genetic diversity, and even then they're not too dissimilar from the rest of humanity. The differences between your DNA and anyone else's on Earth are remarkably small, and you and any random stranger have DNA that is 99.9% identical. By comparison, you're only 0.05% more closely related to your own siblings. But of course, in the 1930s and 40s, there were no DNA tests, just very early theories. So the Nazis had no idea just how off-base they were. To think how much death and destruction could have been avoided if the science was just a little more advanced. But hey, silver lining, we got Call of Duty out of it. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Your DNA is a mix of all your ancestors' traits, but could they have passed on their memories too? Check out our video on Assassin's Creed to learn more. And don't forget to keep on playing.